Scarcity in the Music Industry, Creating Your Own Doors and Trading Skills with Arleigh Savage. Stay inspired. I would love to hear what brought you to music.
Yeah. Oh man. Super musical household, but no professional musicians. That's the funny part. But the nurture element was strong. Yeah, my dad plays guitar, and my mom and dad always sang in church choir. And I just remember hearing a lot of live music either in the house or, like going to hear live music, and that was just there's kind of music always playing in the home. So I think that that foundation, led that to being a part of my life. And and then the bassoon, like Barry Steves was a professor of bassoon at Michigan State when I was growing up in East Lansing, and they just happened to be members of the same Lutheran church as us. So I heard him play bassoon, and my parents took me to the symphony. So I was geeked on bassoon from like the very beginning, and I have a very distinct memory of putting it together for the first time, and like it was definitely taller than me.
Did you do the height test?
Totally, yeah, or the bell. Yeah. My dad recently, or maybe it was my grandma. She's very nostalgic lately. So whenever we see her, she's always giving us old photos or sending them in cards. And she's a really funny one of me practicing my bassoon in her living room. I probably am about 10 years old in the photo. And that's probably when I know your audio, you don't have your audio on. I'm sure we'll talk in the chat, but that's probably around the time that I was at Blue Lake when Richard was teaching. So I think, really just also just so much privilege, access to, education and resources. I grew up in a fairly like affluent middle class college town. So, anything in music that I wanted to do, there were the educators that were, teaching that, and, doing that. It was, kind of at a higher level than I think maybe just like a typical small town or something like that. So I'm very lucky, and I think a lot of my foundation was built because of the wealth of resources in my town for the arts.
How have you cultivated your why you work in the music industry?
Yeah, we talked a lot about the why in the interview. And yeah, I think this may be watched by young people, and then maybe people that are in the middle of their career, or maybe late stage. So I think at different stages of life, there are certain things that become of interest just because of the natural phase of life. And I am noticing in my early 30s that there is kind of a calling for the why that I think, even if I wasn't doing bassoon, and I don't know if you feel this way, but there's kind of you find yourself being a creative type where that sense of what do I have to contribute? Why is the world built like this? How do I fit into it? Is like very interesting and kind of the forefront of my thought, just naturally. But I think in cultivating the why for bassoon, truthfully, I think it really came to the fore because I had just like a major burnout crash in my kind of mid to late 20s that really affected my mental health, and really made me question if I wanted to continue. And yeah, I think that's just kind of like the paradox of life is sometimes you have to like have these like rock bottom moments where you're just so unsure and you don't know where you belong to build the foundation back up, how it aligns with your life and how it can nurture and support you. So I think truthfully, yeah, a lot of the why that I think deeply about as far as like as an artist, like how do I relate to my community, and what projects I want to say yes to. Really, my thought process was built out of that kind of hard experience.
So, in your interview, Arleigh, you shared and we talked about how the music industry can feel like they're gatekeepers to getting a foot in the door or a door, and this feeling can be stressful and promote opportunity scarcity in this industry. Could you share more about the doors that you've created and projects that you're working on?
Yeah, that's like, I think about it all the time. I think that there's just so many amazing, talented people and not enough jobs, and that can be just such a damaging. It's like a tragedy, really, because there are so many. I think you feel the same way. Like you just really wish that everyone could just find a job and
everyone's amazing,
working and happy, and that's the whole thing. But I do think because of often the years of being on the audition grind that it really psychologically can make you feel that, how do I describe it? Not that your playing's like not good enough for the public, but it really makes you. I don't think it's a state of mind where we're really thinking truthfully about like what is this all for? How am I serving the music? How is this going to connect with someone? How did this artist create this composition? What was their frame of mind? How might this relate into our society today? Like, there are so many layers as far as presenting music that I think getting out of that, like, stress and scarcity mindset can allow you to get inside the mind of maybe someone who's not a professional musician themselves, or inside of the mind of someone that, there's just so many different types of people, in our communities and in our spaces, and music will mean something different to each and every one of them. And I find it to be a really fun and productive exercise to kind of imagine, different personalities and different environments, and what that, music programming could bring, even if it's just like excitement and something new and bringing them into your own passion, like, that's, it's kind of like what you hope is that, like, just like your path of being an artist is going to speak to your audience and be inspiring, and, have them connect into their own creativity. But that's just like one way of thinking about how a concert can, project and have value. And I guess I've seen frequently enough in myself and some of my really, really talented peers this kind of closed-in feel where we've forgotten, that the value of giving that music away, and that if you can find that space where it's like not ego-oriented, where you're just like, I practice so much, like I'm so good, and like this product has so much to offer, but the fact that like you're an artist in music, and like you're meant to make people feel things, and that, being vulnerable and being willing to, put what you have to say out there, like that inherently is very valuable. And yeah, so I guess I've been pondering that quite a bit. And I guess as far as like doors that I thought were closed, I feel like I can be so esoteric sometimes that I'm not giving specific examples. In my wind quintet, I do a lot of the kind of administrative side, and I've really found that we feel like there's like barriers to connecting with presenters within the community, just because like you might see, oh, this group won Fish Off and they're performing on that series, like it must be of this level or only promoting this thing. But really it comes down to, I mean, if you have the product, you are playing at a high level, more being able to pitch your idea of programming to the organization and what you have to offer from the programming side of things. So I've noticed some doors open just, getting more comfortable with like bumping into someone like at the grocery store or the farmer's market at something, and they are the executive director of that organization, and being able to be like, hi, I am this person and I play in this group and this is what we do. That's a really scary thing to do, and I don't think we spend enough time, kind of thinking about like what those conversations might look like, and how to, I mean, I guess it's a sales pitch in a way, but if that sales pitch feels really organic, because it is something that you really care about and you are trying to, find performing opportunities, or, trying to teach in a certain way, if you can describe that clearly and simply, those connection moments like end up being open doors more than you think. But of course you can't anticipate when those are going to be, so kind of I guess the magic of the universe. You just have to let things unfold for you.
Are there some ways that you've learned to deal with life stress that you could share with us?
Yeah, for sure. I think, exercise it's a simple one, but it's amazing. So I'm definitely an athlete to a certain degree, and I think figuring out like where the stress is coming from helps you find the tools. I do really like to process outwardly, so that's like a good thing to know about myself, is that, a phone call with a friend, like or a trusted loved one, that is a much better way for me to kind of get out my words and understand what's going on here. But ultimately, I've found that like somatic exercises, like, and somatic meaning like in the body, so whether it's like a breath exercise, or going for a run, or just like coming back into the body itself, has been the most profound type of exercises that I've found most helpful for my own stress and dealing with that, and and like the rumination that can happen, that can be really damaging. So I know during the pandemic I took like one day a week where I would just like go on an adventure. Like I would just go hike somewhere completely new, like spent the whole day doing it. Like didn't let myself do anything else, just get out in nature, just like completely clear the brain of my obligations. And that was like, that totally saved me for a while. It was getting a little dark in there, and it feels kind of frivolous to set aside this time, but like, what is life for if it's not for, exploring and finding joy? And I think being able to like really set boundaries for yourself, where you create space where you're in that mindset and you can put the other things aside a little bit, is it's a pretty profound thing. Truthfully, if you can set aside, like really set it aside, and not, let other things bleed in, or, it's the first thing to go in your schedule.
Arleigh Richards shared a comment and question for you. He shared, I grew up in Lorraine and was tickled to see you move to Cleveland. What all took you there?
Oh, yeah. I know. It's like I've been here 10 years. I just like assume people know my story, but it was grad school. Yeah. So after Michigan State, I came to study at the Cleveland Institute of Music, and I formed the Wind Quintet right after, and started doing quite a bit of activities with them. So in those building years, it made sense for me to stay. And I was also playing with city music then, actually, right after Julie. I got your seat after you left.
And then he's shared, as I recollect, you played a very nice Adler bassoon. What is it now?
Oh, it's a Heckle. It's a late six Heckle. I got an oldie.
Arleigh, could you tell us about your Heckle?
Sure. Yeah. So my Heckle is 6902 is the serial. It was played by a French Canadian guy before I played it, and he actually bought a bell. So he was working. He was getting all his repairs done actually by Ben Bell, and I think at some point, just really loved the system that Ben Bell was creating. So he ended up buying a bell and then selling his instrument. And I mean, it's kind of the Cleveland Orchestra type of bassoon. So I think he knew, to send it over to John Clauser, and one of his students will buy it. Yeah, truthfully, it took me a while to get used to it. It's very it can be a little unstable in the E and the F, and you really have to build such a perfectly balanced reed to find that sweet spot. And the sweet spot is really amazing, but I think whatever it was, I mean, John Clauser is like not super methodical about reed making. It's just like not his thing, and I know a lot of teachers are like that, but that was my undergrad experience. So I think I was like looking for that direction, and it just wasn't part of the curriculum with him. So I ended up kind of struggling for a while to find that equilibrium. But I do love it now, and it really does feel like my voice. And it's a little bassoon, like it's like it's shortboard, and yeah, it just really rings whenever people play it. It's something about the wood and everything. Like I remember John Clauser, he played it and he was like, I would play this in the orchestra like tomorrow. Like he just like fell in love with it, and it's kind of, that's a pretty good recommendation. Though ultimately I do think you need to be the one picking it. But yes, it did end up being the instrument for me. I play on a Garfield style reed, which, already is this little itty bitty thing. So I really struggled to play really solidly at 440, which of course the auditions are demanding, and to feel like I had the stability on the reed, because, you clip it short and then it's sharp, and that was kind of my own version of hell for a while, is like, how do I build a stable reed that also plays in tune. And I think what ultimately ended up happening is, in addition to, refining my reed making, is that my instrument really responds well to like having a lot of like resonant space in your head and like your body. And I'm sure every wind instrument does, but I really think I utilize that sort of like oral space and like the singing vowels, and I think maximizing that has resolved my pitch issue. So who's to know? I wish I could take a time ship back then. And 6902 is the series. Yeah.
What inspired you to grow these performance groups, and could you share a bit more about your love of working in chamber groups?
Yeah. It's just the best. It's where the magic happens. I feel like string players just know this. It's like their best kept secret. And wind chamber programs somehow just don't get the same resources. I know Annie Fillard of the Cavani Quartet always says that. She's saying, like, I always try to integrate the winds into what we were doing with chamber music, and people just, like, the school wasn't responding to it. But I think, I'm just a very people-oriented, extroverted person, and I think it's like all that nonverbal communication from the breathing and the eye contact and the talking about the music, and I just love getting my fingers into it. And to me, chamber music just offers me that environment. To me, it's just the most fun way to make music. So I think I just was lucky that friends of mine wanted me to join this group. And I think I still was just like learning what it was all about, and I stuck with it just because I just really enjoyed it so much, and it was such a great balm to the hours alone in the practice room. Which I it's funny because I spend a lot of time alone. I mean, I think we do as instrumentalists, like making reeds, and 90% of it I absolutely love, but it's like the 10% where you feel disconnected that can really just derail and be like a dark hole sucking all your energy away. So I think my time working with that group just brought so much energy into like pouring back into what I was trying to do on my own in the instrument. Um, yeah. So I've continued doing it, and we've had people leave the group, and so I've stepped into more leadership roles, just out of necessity, and then also finding that I like that. Um, so yeah, I mean, and even like my band sorority, it's just like it really is like I could have never in a million years predicted that in this year that I would be doing this project. I met the cellist that I work with in my other band, Cello Centric, which is non-classical, and I started playing in that group. I just sat in for a gig that was supposed to be for cello, and it was just like, we have this paying gig, like we kind of have the music written down. Do you think you can read it? We need someone to play this gig. And it's so funny. You look back on those moments where it's like, oh, 4 years later, I'm gonna have recording an album with this group or something. You can't really predict it. So some of it has been like very intentionally created, and some of it has just evolved in a really beautiful way.
Could you share some of your personal experiences with skill trading?
Yeah. I did a recording project in the spring during the pandemic, and I ended up having a recording engineer basically do the project pro bono, because I had been a musician that had done quite a bit of work for him when he was starting this upstart scoring stage in the Youngstown area, 5 or 6 years prior. And sometimes you don't even realize, in helping someone else with their fledgling project, that the kind of the bonds and resources that can offer you later when someone, not that he felt indebted, but he was very grateful that I was willing to come down for I think the budget was quite small at the time, and just having faith to routinely come down and do work for these basically film scores we were recording with ClickTrack. It was, I thought it was a lot of fun. I was so eager to work. So I think, just examples of that, just seeing, when someone is trying to get their project off the ground, if you can be a resource to them, that you can kind of hit them up for that later. I've found that a lot, actually, where and I think also realizing when someone in the industry is offering you something, like, and saying yes. Like, I think in this particular gentleman, I just like, oh, he's just being nice. But I mean, you realize, oh, like I actually, I need to do this project. I need to call in a favor from someone, and he was more than happy to. So we were able to do that project on a really small budget because of just like these relationships that we had with people in the community that were like, we really want to see you do this, so we're gonna rally together, and you can hit us up later, that sort of thing.
Can you share any tips on how to start these conversations around, the option of trading skills?
Yeah, that's a really good thing to think about. I think ultimately it really does come down to relationships. You can't really do that ask unless you've built a trust with that colleague or that conductor or that engineer, whatever that is. So I don't necessarily have advice for what the conversation looks like, but I would say I just see a lot of people do a lot of gigs, especially local gigs, and a get in, get out mentality. And I think maybe that serves some people where they really feel like, I'm going to move any day, I'm taking all these auditions, you don't feel super rooted. But I think there are a lot of missed opportunities by not really feeling connected into the organization that you're doing work for. So I guess if I have any advice on that terms, I would just say, you know, consider relationships and consider the value of them, because that's when you can do the skill trading, and that's when you are a player in your ecosystem, if you will, because you've built that trust with whoever those people are, and that's how those conversations can happen.
Are there any music book recommendation that you could share with us to check out?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Not a Bassoon book, but one that I do love to come back to is Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. She's the Eat, Pray, Love author, so a lot of people know her work. She's quite trendy, if you will. But that book really, it just speaks to creatives, and it's a reminder of the courage that it takes to, go down your own path and, um, have an idea and bring it to life, like the process of that and how, in a way, like sacred it is. And she speaks in just such, just like a fun, like, she's just like, this is a miracle. Like, your own creativity really is a miracle in the world. But she writes about it, from that just kind of really sweet perspective, but also, very, seriously, that, to live as a creative person is, can be hard work, and that there is a process towards tapping into, what your life's work is. So I just love that book. If I'm ever feeling like stale or something, like what is this all about? I love grabbing Big Magic and reading that book.
And Arleigh, are there any bassoon works that you're working on right now that you could share with us?
Yeah, I did. So in March, I gave a solo recital virtually, and so I did some research on unaccompanied bassoon pieces. And there were a couple that I really loved. So I don't know if anyone watches this later. But the first of which was by Lithuanian composer Zilvinas Smollers, and it's called Confessions. And it's a 7-movement work that explores just different emotions. Um, and it's really fun. It's a cool piece. It's a real like crowd pleaser. Like the tonal language is just, I guess, pretty easy to digest. And you can choose some movements or play the suite of them. I just really enjoyed playing that piece. And then, um, yeah, the other one is by Cameroonian composer Elsa Mambawa. And she was commissioned, I'm like losing, Midori Sampson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you probably know about her. Did you have her on here? Probably
not yet. Would love to.
Okay. Yeah. So Midori basically, during for her DMA project, or I'm not sure exactly, or it wasn't, instead of doing like a research paper, she did this big commissioning project for composers from African countries. And yeah, it's just incredible, the range of types of compositions that were written for bassoon is quite wide ranging. But this one in particular is really fun. It comes with a pre-recorded track, and and then you read a graphic score, so it's basically images in a map sort of, that you improvise to the shapes and colors that you see to the pre-recorded track. So I think it's a fun one if anyone wants to get into improvisation, or is curious about that. And through Midori's project, when you buy the piece, the money goes directly to the composer too. It's kind of a win-win for everyone.
Is there a course from university that you wish had been offered?
Yeah. Okay, I was thinking about this, and absolutely some of those ones that come to mind about entrepreneurship and thinking as a small business owner. I echo that wholeheartedly. I would have loved more of those resources. But the biggest one that I've thought about post college years is not a completely different course, but how courses are taught, especially music theory and ear training. It doesn't make any sense to me that we don't integrate our instruments into these classes, like ever. You sit with a notebook in ear training class and you sing, which is fine. I mean, our instruments are an extension of our voice, but I just think it just doesn't make any sense. Like, why are ear training programs not taught in a way where you actively integrate the instrument that you have poured, thousands of hours into and feel most comfortable with to understand harmony, especially if you play a single line instrument. And it's just like, I just don't even think it's a thing. Like, I do not know of an ear training course where for instrumental players that your instrument is like the main way that you would connect to hearing, and then that would be the familiarity and something that is unfamiliar. And I really struggled with ear training. I learned to sing by rote, not by reading music. So I have a good ear, but hearing intervals, it's just like, it's still very hard for me. It just was not a skill that was developed. So, but in my band and with my band that I was in before I started working in sorority, we do a lot of songwriting, and I've been so lucky to have a peer that has really encouraged me. Like, you have a really, you have a good musical intuition and good musical ideas. I want to hear them, and we just laugh at each other when we try to do rhythmic and melodic dictations of what we're creating, because that's the hard part, is the transcribing. It's not actually the creating and the hearing. It's the connecting, putting it on paper. So and likewise in your music theory, I think especially for single line instruments, there so much of it is, hearing something on piano, which is fine, but I could just see a curriculum where somehow, like daily, when you are in that class, that playing and understanding the chord textures and hearing it would just be actively involved with playing your instrument. And I think that it just could be incredible what students could learn. Cultivate almost a perfect pitch with your instrument, where
Yes.
you probably hear a B flat in your head.
Yes, because you know what it is and it feels like.
Yeah, so you can use, and I use this with my students all the time. I really try to build on their strengths, and tell them, like, your strength is this, you need to use your ear more. You're not using the skill that you have. We don't have this skill. Rhythm is hard, but we do have the skill. Let's build on that. And I feel like there could be some like alternative perfect pitch that you could cultivate, which would be like relative pitch with your instrument, because it's something like you feel in your hands, like fingering a B flat. You can almost like imagine what that sounds like. And I haven't even really practiced like creating perfect pitch by imagining a pitch on my bassoon, but I feel like if I did that every day,
yes,
I probably could imagine like playing a low F and probably sing it. But I've never, like, not even once was that synergy of, what is the instrument that you play, like, ever brought into the classroom. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, I think it's more difficult, right? You have to, it'd be a different type of curriculum, and like everyone's like, it'd be loud or something, so people are playing. I don't know. It just would be different, and I just don't think it's been done. The practical application of instrumental studies in theory or something, you know. It's just fun to talk about. It could be so cool, and then you go into your sectional and you're playing Strauss, and suddenly it's like, oh, I actually want to know like what part of this crazy chord I'm playing, and it is a practical application. And you know, it's not that students aren't doing that. Like, I think the idea is you learn in the classroom and bring that to what you're doing. But I think that application could be taught.
Is there something new that you've learned recently that you could share with us about?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I think the biggest thing I learned is like I actually really like to write music and like come up with um, yeah, melodies and textures, and yeah, creating music is something that I really like to do. And you know, I remember I had a composer friend at CIM, and he's like, everyone's a composer. Like, I remember him saying, like, he was so nice about it. And I was like, no, no, no. Like, like I'm just thinking like a big orchestral score, you know. But it was the transcribing of the musical idea that I didn't know how to do. It wasn't the musical creation itself. And that's been, I think it's fun as an adult to have moments where you do have the realizations that you have these growth areas. So I guess that's been my growth area.
Thank you so much, Arleigh, for this wonderful discussion.